Anna Wintour, welcome to Athens.
Thank
you very much for giving me the chance to have an interview with you. Actually, I'm not a fashion expert. My field is economics and politics, but as I see it, fashion industry has much politics and economics. Is that right?
Yes, well, obviously it's a huge industry, so it is an enormous economic factor. And speaking really for the fashion industry within the United States at a time when everybody is very focused on the 2020 election, that there is no doubt that a lot of the designers, whether they are based in New York or Los Angeles, wherever it may be in the States, are very committed to supporting a Democratic candidate because they definitely feel that change is necessary in the White House. But I think beyond the obvious political support that the fashion industry can deliver, I think there are other initiatives that everybody globally takes extremely seriously, and I would mention diversity and inclusivity, which has been so much on everybody's minds over the last decade particularly, and now with the more recent UN climate reports, I think that we are looking at what we can do at sustainability as an industry and how we can introduce best practices and what we can do to be so much more responsible.
I know that you have been working hard these years to push a change towards sustainable and ethical fashion. So the question is, why did it take so long? And does the international fashion industry really mean it?
I think it's an essential decision, and yes, you're absolutely right. Many of us were late to the discussion, but there is no doubt in my mind. You know, as you know, I travel widely and in conversations constantly with designers and CEOs and those people who work in retail and online digital businesses, and there's absolutely no question that this is top of everybody's conversations. And I think, you know, we're really very lucky to have pioneers in our world like Stella McCartney, who has done so much in terms of being a voice in that particular arena. I think that when she started her business, which must have been over 20 years ago, now she was very much a voice in the wilderness. Yes, there were those who felt as she did, but she was by far the voice that was being most heard. And what I admire so much about Stella in the fact that now everybody is joining forces with her, that she is so welcoming. She's not in any way angry or saying, why are you so late? She wants to engage, she wants to teach, she wants to help us all understand what we can do that will improve conditions, because as you know, the fashion industry is, I think, the second biggest polluter.
Yes, this is right. And on the other hand, there is much discussion about working conditions in developing countries and so on. But, you know, the main question or the dilemma is a sustainable fashion would mean the raise of cost for clothing. Wouldn't that mean exclusion for millions of women that do not have enough money to spend on clothing?
I think we have to think about the value of fashion and what does that mean in today's world. And I think what we're very focused on, certainly at Condé Nast from a global perspective, is talking to our readers, our audiences, about the value of fashion and how important it is to recognize the craft and the creativity that goes into the making of a beautiful garment. And obviously this is way outside most people's purview, but if you look at the amazing craft and care and hours and hours of work that go into the atelier, into the work at the ateliers of Paris or indeed in Rome, and those garments, those clothes, those costumes may well end up in an exhibition gallery. So I think you have that at the top end of the spectrum, that we have to understand the value of what the best of fashion can mean. And through the work that I do at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, when we have an exhibition that has huge audiences. I think we had over 1.5 million at a recent exhibition that looked at the influence of the Catholic Church on costume, and you see people from all over the world come and study and look and learn and wanted to know more about craft and creativity. So you have that at one end of the spectrum, and then at another end you have a very responsible company, say like a Zara, who is now putting into place the very best sustainable practices so that their fashion can be available to women and men at a very reasonable price. So I think that this is a conscious decision being made across the industry, that we all need to be more responsible and more cognizant of everything that we need to do.
You mentioned inclusivity before. We see more and more elder models, plus-size models, or transgender models. Is that an honest choice, or is it a debt that you have to pay?
No, not at all. I feel that, again, maybe through listening to younger people about the idea of what is beautiful, and maybe because we're living in a time where things are quite divisive and that there is certainly separation in terms of views, that the fashion world, I believe, the fashion industry has stepped up to talk about diversity and inclusivity in the most positive way, and that you can be and should be inclusive to people from all backgrounds, from all cultures, we can celebrate different sexual orientations, we can celebrate different size, we can just really celebrate young men, young women, of all backgrounds. And also, in response to your question, indeed, it doesn't mean that it's only about super young people. Fashion can be and should be for all, and I don't think that that is a message for one season. I think it's a message for all time.
Have inclusivity attempts given results? I mean, I see women still hating wrinkles, hating curves. They want to be thin, they want to be perfect.
I think it's much more important to talk to one's audiences about being healthy and at peace with the way that you look, and to talk about fitness and nutrition, as well as really being the best of yourself. And I think, again, we need to learn from a younger generation who are very celebratory of how they look and how they project themselves. And I think sometimes are completely at odds with what is the stereotype thinking that you are discussing. And I think it's much more about having a sense of self-confidence and self-worth and feeling good about who you are and what you do and what you want to achieve in the world than simply about appearance. And I think with that confidence and that sense of self comes a recognition that appearance is important, but not the only thing that matters.
So a different notion of beauty.
An inclusive sense of beauty, to be clearer.
Anna, who was the last woman that inspired you, and why?
Well, as we were talking before, I really am inspired by a younger generation of women. Obviously, I've had many mentors and women that have inspired me throughout my career, but when I look at the sea change that we're going through in the world right now, and I look at the young men and young women marching in the streets, whether it's in support of women's issues, or whether it's in support of gay rights, or whether it's in support of gun control or climate change, I look at all of them as the leaders for the future. And that, to me, is so inspiring, and it would be my hope, particularly talking again about the United States, is come November 2020, it is the younger generation that will make the difference in the election results.
You haven't hidden your political preferences. Will Vogue raise its political voice in these elections?
I think that there's no question that all of us within the industry and within Vogue certainly have many beliefs that are contrary to those that are leading the country right now, and we try and educate and inform and engage people in the conversation rather than simply being angry. I don't think that that is the way forward. So I think that we look at using our voices and our journalistic integrity as a way to inform those who are generous enough to read us.
But fashion can change electoral behavior. Don't you believe in this?
Well, I think that certainly many of the designers that I have talked to from a worldwide perspective will be standing out for encouraging people to vote in 2020. I think they certainly stand up in many different ways for the rights that we were discussing, be it human rights or women's rights or gay rights. There's no question that the industry uses its voice to do good. And I feel very, very lucky to be part of that.
I don't know if you want to answer to this question, but I think we've seen 2 or 3 times in your covers Michelle Obama as a First Lady. We've never seen Melania Trump. Is that a choice?
Well, actually, you're incorrect about that. When Melania became engaged to the president, American Vogue helped her find her dress. It was, in the end, it was a design by John Galliano, who was at that time working for Christian Dior, and she was on the cover right before she got married. The first bride
before she becomes First Lady.
The first bride that I was aware of that didn't mind the world seeing her dress before she walked down the aisle. So she has been on the cover of Vogue.
Yes, but before she becomes First Lady.
This is true.
Yeah. Being who you are and having the influence that you have, how do you understand your personal responsibility in fashion industry, and which is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Well, I've been so fortunate in my career, and I think having a journalist, both my brother is a journalist and my father was a journalist, to have those examples in my life about standing up for what you believe in and to telling the truth in through the channels that are available to you. I have felt very fortunate, but also very responsible, and I take the work that I do at the Metropolitan Museum of Art or in supporting young designers, particularly in the US, but indeed worldwide, or helping mentoring young people throughout the world or within the offices of Condé Nast. I take those opportunities very, very seriously. So I think if I think about a legacy, or if I think about how I would want people to remember the time that I've been so fortunate to have at Vogue, it would be able to point to the opportunities that I have been given and hope that I have risen to those.
Anna Wintour, thank you very much for this interview. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you.